And so it is. Welcome to the Mod 2 overview. Let's chat about Mod 2. So Mod 2 looks like this. By the end of this module, you should be able to build simple APIs using Rails, build websites with HTML and CSS, demonstrate basic programming proficiency with JavaScript, create and manipulate DOM nodes, retrieve data using fetch, describe how the web and internet work, and submit data using forms. So big picture, this mod is huge. This is by far the biggest of all 5 mods. As far as like breadth of content we cover, this is the whole thing. And this is probably where Flatiron Denver differs the most from other campuses. So the way a typical Mod 2 works is you build raw servers using a thing called Rack. And then you build really light servers using a framework called Sinatra. We spend the first week on those 2 things. And then we spend 4 days on Rails, and then you have your code challenge. And then the kind of Rails that you're learning is not the kind of Rails that you do in Mod 3 and onward. That's not the kind of Rails that like anybody does in 2020. So Dan and I taught that version of Mod 2 for a few mods, and then we said, what if we dumped the Rack and Sinatra thing? And so we dumped the Rack and Sinatra thing and just did 2 weeks of Rails. And we're like, wow, that was a huge improvement. And then we went, okay, what if we taught people real Rails instead of stupid Rails? And we did that, and it was a massive improvement. Better prepared people for the rest of the program, better prepared people for their careers. And so then we put together this Mod 2. You guys are now the 7th or 8th cohort to do this version of it. That is real full stack engineering. Goes all the way across it. So by the end of this module, you can make apps. And then we spend the rest of the program learning how to make better apps. But you'll probably find the least one-to-one connection between what's on the Flatiron site and what's in LearnCo in this module. So just know that this one gets weird. Questions about that, why we did it, what's in it, what's not in it, anything like that?
So basically it just sounds like just follow the LearnCo and we'll be all right?
No, follow the Flatiron site, you'll be all right. LearnCo will lead you wildly astray if you try to follow the menu on that. One of Ahmed's axioms is if it says ERB on it, don't do it. It's for the other kind of Mod 2. And no matter how much we hammer on that, somebody this week is going to go, hey, what's this ERB thing all about? Don't do anything with ERB on it. And if you want a playbook to go through, this is it. Go through these. What else? Other questions about big picture, what we're doing in Mod 2?
Is the JavaScript stuff similar to what we're doing? The JavaScript stuff on LearnCo similar?
Yeah, a lot of these things still are LearnCo labs, like these are.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to go through we go into LearnCo and you try to go down this thing on the left, you are probably going to be disappointed because you will very quickly run into things that are probably not a great use of your time. Oh, also, you'll notice that a lot of the JavaScript stuff says Module 3 on it. In fact, about 90% of the labs that you do will say Mod 3 in LearnCo. There's only a very little bit of the actual Mod 2 that we do. Now, you may remember from Mod 1, you have to go to Switch Materials, and you have to be in, see how many of these fucking things I have? You have to be in the right one when you click on the link, otherwise it's not gonna work. I'm gonna say it 3 times because that's probably the question I answered the most in the first day. You have to go to Switch Materials, and you have to be in the correct module for that lab. You have to click on Switch Materials, and you have to be in the right module for that lab. You go to Flatiron School and you click on one of these things and it just refreshes the page. You need to go over to Switch Materials, and you got to be in whatever lab that one is. If you're not sure, you hover over it, down in the bottom, it'll tell you in the URL. Cool. Other questions, big picture about what Mod 2 is all about?
Do we get away from using Ruby, and like, are we going to be using JavaScript more than anything moving forward?
Yes. But like, Ruby is still your backend language. So this create simple APIs using Rails. Rails is built on top of Ruby. So you still write plenty of it. But I would say for the rest of the program, you're probably looking at an 80-20 split on mostly JavaScript, a little bit of Ruby. What else? Cool.
What does the project and code challenge look like for this mod?
So I'm about to show you what the code challenge kind of looks like. The project, and really all your projects for the rest of the program, make a web app. That's kind of it. Don't overthink it too much. In Denver, we don't get too picky about technologies. So like, you're probably, especially for Mod 2, best off making a Rails backend and an HTML and CSS and JavaScript front end and calling that good. But fuck it. If you want to do a Python backend and you want to do a React front end or something in Mod 2, we don't say no to that kind of thing around here. But just about every one of you would probably be better served making some kind of Rails API. Just like in Mod 1, how you use those APIs, now you're going to make those APIs, and you're going to make it show up in a browser instead of on a command line. And for the rest of the program, just make more complicated versions of that. There's like official project requirements somewhere in LearnCo. We don't really adhere too closely to those. Like the Mod 2 one is like, it needs to have 15 tests or some shit like that. I don't care about that. Make a web app. Other questions? Cool. Let's see what it looks like when we do all of these things together. Okay, nothing up this sleeve, nothing up this sleeve. So first we're going to make a backend. And remember, you're not following along with this. I wouldn't even recommend necessarily taking notes. You're not going to be able to do anything different at the end of this demo, but you'll see what you should be able to do by like next Friday, just like in Mod 1. All right, so I'm going to make a Rails backend. Rails has all kinds of cool command line little like generator tools. So we're going to use one to make a new Rails app. This one's going to be called, oh, hey, I like the dogs API so much, let's just make a dogs one. Call it Dog Pound. So it makes a whole bunch of files for me. And then what I end up with is this sprawling, complicated directory structure, which looks like that. All these folders, all these files. Now the good news is there is very few of these files that you like need to edit directly or work with or anything like that. But it can look quite intimidating when you're getting started, just the hundreds of files that it generates for you. And then we have all kinds of cool Rails commands that'll help us build out our app. So, all right, we want to work with dogs. We can Rails generate model dog. Cool. It made a database migration for me. It made my like Ruby model file. It even made some tests for me. And if I look at those, hey, that kind of looks like those models we were making in Mod 1. All right. If I look over at that migration, hey, that kind of looks like that migration we were making in Mod 1. So I could say something like, all right, dogs have names. All right, so I've made my dog migration. Rails DB migrate. All right, I added a table to a database. Can I use that SQL stuff we were doing in Mod 1? Why, yes, I can. I can say, hey, what's the schema? There's my dogs table. Select all from dogs. Cool. Nothing comes back. Haven't had any records yet. Can I seed? Why, yes, I can. In fact, this DB seeds file is all set up and ready to go for me. I can do something like Bixby is dog.create crate. Nice. Name is Bixby. I can make a Mesa. I can make Harmony. All right, so I can make these dogs. If I do Rails DB seed, it adds them to my database. Here, I can prove it. If I go back into that database, hey, there's my dogs. Okay, so I've made this model, made this database, got some stuff going on in it. Now from the other side of this, request comes in from the internet. I need to tell that request where to go. And I do that with a router. So I can say, hey, if I get a GET request to dogs, send that request to dogs, the dogs controller's index method. And then you can say, hey, can we generate a controller called dogs? Then if I go over to that dogs controller and make a method in this class called index, I can do stuff like use active record to get all those dogs. And then I can send it back as JSON. I should probably make that an instance variable. Neat. Now, watch this. If I do Rails serve, yep, server, Rails S, there we go. All right, on port 3000, if I go to localhost 3000 in my browser, /dogs, holy shit, there's my dogs from my database, rad! So that means if I make a browser request this URL, it gets that JSON back. It can do stuff like make it show up on a web page. Pretty sick. So there's one extra thing that we need to do to allow a browser to talk to this Rails app. We got to say, hey, browsers are allowed to make requests to this web app. And our gem file, it's got all this stuff in it already. We just got to uncomment out a line. And gem install, bundle install. Cool. That's Rails APIs. you do like a little tiny bit more with it. Like we need to be able to add stuff to a database. We need to be able to update stuff in the database. But otherwise, that's probably what we're going to spend like the first half of this week doing is what I just did. So Ahmed's going to give you a run through at 1 o'clock on like how to get started with this. Or no, you guys are at 11, I think. How to get started with Rails. But this is what that first standard looks like. Creating simple APIs using Rails. So you should be able to talk about controllers and models and know what some of those folders are and some of those commands do and that kind of stuff. All right. To the exact opposite side of the stack, we start talking about HTML and CSS. So if I can get these dogs coming back from my Rails server, I want to make them show up on a web page. So if I go to make a new folder called dog pound front end. All right, nothing in the folder. I make an index.html page, an app.js page, an a file, and then an app.css file. So I have 3 empty files in this folder. I think some of you did HTML in the pre-work. I think that's in there somewhere. So we make a valid HTML document. And then we add the style sheet and the gerbil script file to it. Here's where you find a style sheet we can use. Here's where you find an app.js file that we can use. Then we can put stuff that shows up on the page like this. Cool. So if I have this HTML document, I can serve it up. Hey, and I got stuff showing up on a page. If I want it to not look quite so butt ugly, I can go into that CSS file and actually show you in real time. Let's go light server there. That's on 3000, cool. So I could say something like, I want all of my headers to have red text. It's H1, right? Oop, 404. Shouldn't have. Why is that 404-ing? Okay, looks all right here. Looks all right there. Found the JavaScript file. Didn't find the CSS file. Can't fathom why it wouldn't like the slash on that. All right, it's a link, rel, style sheet, href. How strange. Ah! Refuse to apply style, found the file. Refuse to use it. Wow, that's a new browser thing, I think. Let's try that over in Firefox. There we go. Works there. Neat. That's the thing I get to look into today. So I can apply styles to a page here. For example, one of the things that I think looks the most garbage on this is default typefaces. So let's say I wanted to use a different typeface. I want to show you how easy that is to head off in your project presentations in 3 weeks. Like, oh, we ran out of time to change the default typeface. No, you didn't. Doesn't take very long. I go, cool, I want to use this typeface. There she blows. And I can say font family is Roboto, falls back to Sun Sans Serif. And just like that, hey, we're not using default typography anymore. So keep that in mind the next time we're like, we didn't have time to change the font. Give this some padding. And all of a sudden we have something that doesn't look quite so dog shit. All right, that's HTML and CSS. Ta-da! Now, we need to bridge this front end and this back end. I don't want to just hard code in every dog that I want to show up on this page. What I actually want to do is read those out of the API. And so I go over to this app.js file, and I say, fetch me, get it, fetch, some dogs from localhost 3000. When you get them back, they're coming back as a JSON string. So why don't you take that and turn it into an object for me. And for right now, why don't you just log what those dogs look like. So I do that. I look at my console. Yep, something I didn't like. Oh, it's because I'm not running the server. That'll do it. There we go. All right, let's use a different port. All right, so that one's on 4,000 now. And there's some dogs. I got an array of dogs. So what I just did there was I retrieved data using fetch. I also did a little bit of basic programming proficiency with JavaScript. Now it's time to create and manipulate DOM nodes with it. So if I take that array that I get back and I turn it into an array of like HTML elements, basically, say response.dogs map. Hey, there's that map thing again, just like in mod 1. And I say I want to make a new element. And I want to make it text content dog.name. Cool. And then return the div. So I've turned all of these dogs that I got back from the response into a div, an HTML div with the dog name in it. Cool. Then maybe let's see, what's the next thing I could do? Then I could do something like wrap those in LIs. So I could say li is li, and let's say that its inner HTML should be dog. And I could say, hey, for each of those LIs, why don't we get that unordered list that I have on the page here? Query selector UL, and for every one of those LIs, we're going to each through them. And we're going to add them to the page. Cool. Did it work? Almost. Ooh, I see why. Append. All right, there they are. Look, my dogs from my Rails API. They're showing up on my website. I can get rid of that hard-coded one. Wow, that looks a lot like I have created and manipulated DOM nodes. I fetched those things. I did a whole bunch of JavaScript. I did some HTML and CSS. I made an API with Rails. All that debugging I did was like working with web and internet kind of stuff. One last thing you need to be able to do to make it through Mod 2, and that is work with forms. So you got to be able to add a dog. So we'll say that dogs have names, so we'll say that that's the placeholder. Got this name attribute. It's going to have a submit button. And this is going to use the HTTP post method, and it's going to send the form over to localhost 4000/dogs. And back over in Rails land, if I say, hey, when I get a post request into dogs, why don't you send that request over to the dogs controller's create action. And so I go over to the dogs controller. I make a create method. And I say, hey, I'm making a new dog. You want in? And its name comes in from params name. And then once you've done that, I want you to redirect me back to localhost 3000, which I think is what that site is on right now. Yeah. Why don't you send me back there once you're done? So I've got Bixby, Mesa, and Harmony. If I throw Gonzo in there, let's see what happens. I did it twice, but hey, look! We submitted data using forms. If you can do all of those things, you can pass the code challenge next week, and you have been successful in Mod 2. So again, you shouldn't know how to do any of this stuff right now. You should know how to do it in 2 weeks. But with that in mind, what questions do you have?
So we're gonna start with sending stuff from the back end to the front end with JSON rather than using like templating or something like that. And
no templating.
okay.
We are eschewing templating in favor of JSON APIs. Because it's 2020. It's not that templating doesn't exist anymore. It's just fringe. It's a little out there now. It has like some serious use cases. Like Wikipedia has been a templated app like for pretty much all of its existence. It's actually just starting to switch now. But there's some really good performance use cases. If you're on a metered connection in Africa, a templated app is way more cost-effective and performant than a JSON one. For the other 90% of use cases, though, and if I only got 15 weeks with you, I'm not spending much time on templating. Other questions about what we're doing the next couple weeks?
We don't really need to worry about CSS styling at this point.
Yeah, you should start on it. So we'll do some of that this week. That's in this second standard here. We'll definitely talk about that. Because if you were under the impression that like, I'm a programmer, I get away with making butt ugly apps, it's not true. So we gotta start making a dent on that also. But we're going an inch deep on all of these topics. Mod 3 is Mod 2 Part 2. We go a lot deeper on all of the exact same things. So if you feel like, I just scratched the surface with that, yeah, that's intentional. That's the point. We're going to go deeper next mod. Promise. Other questions?
Do you have any good outside resources you'd suggest to look at for like the DOM manipulation and stuff like that?
It's a good question. If you want an outside resource, the MDN stuff is always really good. I think there's some guides that they have also, references and guides. Learn web development. All of this like learning web development stuff in the MDN guides, solid stuff. And like very appropriate to you. Dynamic client-side scripting. A little pretentious. What else?
So as we've gone through the course, every tech has been upgraded to make it easier along the way. What will this current tech be upgraded to in a couple of weeks?
So if I were doing this in Mod 4, so what the Mod 4 folks are doing right now is instead of writing all of this shit out, as like a raw index.html file and this app.js file, what we do instead. Let's see. So I've got this front end, this back end. If I did create React app, dog pound React, then I get something that looks probably closer to the that like Rails thing with like all the folders and files and like that kind of shit. It's funny because this is literally what's happening in the Mod 4 review right now. So we go over to dog pound React, kill off this server, go over here, run a start command. And like I said, we get all these like scaffolded files. It's a little bit less crazy than the Rails one is. If I go over here, I have something that kind of looks like HTML and JavaScript at the same time. What? And if I delete all that stuff and copy in some of this, let's see, and that's on 3000. All right. Starting to kind of look the same. But instead of just having this JavaScript file where everything's all out in the open, it's all in this like tangly kind of architecture here. So let me see if I can make a fast Rails React app. And then let's see, I had all of these. I don't need to do that anymore. And then this becomes dogs. And then, oh shoot, I can't remember how to do the use effect. Fuck. But anyway, it's more like this. It's a lot of the exact same typing. I mean, fuck, I even copy pasted the HTML in. But way more powerful, way more dynamic. That's how you make Gmail. Oh my God, everything's yelling at me. Shut up. It's AAA of all things. Put on Do Not Disturb. Why is it doing this? Good God, shut the fuck up. All right.
So the React file kind of like combines the HTML and JavaScript into one.
Correct. It blurs the line between them pretty heavily. Cool. What else? To give you a sense of pacing on this, if we're about here by the end of the week, I'd feel good about that. And if we're here Monday, Tuesday, feel okay about that. Forms, Wednesday. That's like roughly pace. Some of you are going to be ahead of that. Some of you are going to be behind that. I'm not losing too much sleep about it. But that's about how that spreads out. Of all of these, the first one's probably the hardest. I spend the most time on APIs with Rails. What else? Cool. Take a breather. I think Ahmed is going to slow like walk you through getting started with Rails and give you like some footholds for getting started with that. But keep your head up. This mod is hard. It's also super rewarding. You will like make apps that you can, send people and shit by the end of this one. So stick with it. You'll get it. Everybody does. And I'll see you on the pitch.